Hi everyone, today I'm going to be doing my wrap-up of the finalists for this year's Hugo Award for Best Series, which is going to get announced in just a couple of days. This started out as part of my Hugo Awards reading project, where I was reading all the finalists for this year's award for Best Novel, but I found I was getting through those books pretty quickly, so I decided I wanted to pick a different category in the Hugos and read through all the finalists in that category as well. I ended up deciding on Best Series, so today I'm going to be doing my personal ranking of all the finalists in the Best Series category. The Hugo Award for Best Series is actually the newest category in the Hugo Awards. It's only been around since 2017. I thought it would be a fun category to read the finalists for. Of course, I knew that there was no way that I could read all of the books in 6 different series in just a couple of months, so I decided that I was going to read just the first book in each series, and then I'd at least be able to comment on how much I enjoyed the first entry in each series, and also whether I personally felt like I would want to read more books in that series or not. The rules for this award is that in order to be nominated, a series has to have at least 3 works in it, and it has to be a total of at least 240,000 words long, and then the series has to have an entry that was published in the previous calendar year. So the first series that ever won this award was pretty much my all-time favorite series, which is the Vorkosigan Saga by Lois McMaster-Bujold. My understanding of how this award was supposed to work is that it was kind of intended to be a place where the sort of long-running fan favorite series that wouldn't necessarily have works get nominated for Best Novel, that this category would be kind of a place for those series to go. I think the reality has been a little bit more mixed. There have been series that were nominated for Best Series that also had books that won over finalists for Best Novel, and there are a lot of books on the list that are trilogies or quartets, so it's actually kind of a mix. So just like I did for the Best Novel finalists a few days ago, I'm going to do a quick recap of all the different series that are finalists in this category, and then after that I will go through again and give my personal ranking from number 6 to number 1. The first series that's a finalist is The Expanse by James S.A. Corey. That is actually a pen name for 2 different authors, Daniel Abraham and Ty Frank. This series is obviously probably the most well-known series on this list, and it's very popular. It has 8 volumes out, and the 9th one is coming out this year, I think. It also has a television series, which is currently on Amazon Prime, which I haven't seen yet. I kind of wanted to read the book series first. But I probably don't need to give a ton of explanation about what this series is about. You've probably heard of it before. It's space opera. The first book in the series is Leviathan Wakes, and I've had this series and the TV series as well recommended to me by a bunch of friends who are science fiction fans. This series has already been a finalist for this award a few years ago. Maybe I think it was in the first year of the award. But the rule is that series can become re-eligible after either 2 or 3 more books get published. I can't remember right now. So it did not win last time, obviously, so we'll see if it wins this time. The next series that's a finalist is the Encrypted series by Seanan McGuire. Seanan McGuire also has her novel Middle Game as a finalist for the Best Novel Award this year, and I think she's also had other series be nominated for the Best Series Award before, so I think she is clearly a very prolific writer. This was only the second thing I've read by her after Middle Game. The premise behind this series is that there's a family of cryptozoologists, the Price family, and they are trying to study and protect all the creatures from myth and legend called cryptids, which are being hunted down. I just posted up a review of the first book, Discount Armageddon, so if this sounds like something you're interested in, you can check that out to learn more about Discount Armageddon and about the Encrypted series. The next series is the Luna series by Ian McDonald. This series is science fiction. It's about warring families on the moon where there is no rule of law. There is basically only contract law. This has been described as Game of Thrones on the moon, and I don't usually think comparisons like that are very helpful, but in this case, I think it actually does give you a pretty good idea what the series is like. The next series is the Planetfall series by Emma Newman. This is probably the hardest series to talk about because there are 4 books in this series, but they are only loosely connected. I think the second and the fourth books in this series might have some of the same characters, but the rest are not really related to each other. They're just set in the same universe. I don't even really know if they explore the same themes or if each one is distinct. Planetfall, the first book, is sort of a dark psychological thriller set on another planet with a relatively new human colony. There's one series that I had actually read before any of this year's finalists were announced, and that is the Winternight Trilogy by Katherine Arden. This is historical fantasy set in medieval Russia. The major themes of this trilogy deal with the old ways kind of dying out and Orthodox Christianity taking its place. It draws a lot on Russian folklore and mythology, and it's a very atmospheric series. The main character of this series, Vasya, is a girl who has some supernatural descent. She can see and communicate with a lot of creatures from mythology that the people around her might still have some folk belief in, or they might think they're devils, but she is the only one that can actually see and interact with this supernatural world. Then finally, we have the Wormwood Trilogy by Tade Thompson. This is a science fiction trilogy that is set in near future Nigeria. It's also a little bit hard to describe, but it's essentially a first contact story with some other strange things going on as well. So now that I've recapped what all the different finalists are in this category, I'll just go through and do my personal ranking. This is really based on the first book in each series because, like I said, I've only read the first book in all of these series, except for the Winternight Trilogy, where I have read it before. Just as a reminder, this is still just my personal opinion, and it's based on my personal enjoyment of all of these books. This isn't really a prediction of what books I think will win, it's just for fun. I will also say I found this list a little bit challenging to get through, especially in comparison to the finalists for Best Novel. That isn't something I expected, but just most of these books were not books that I would have picked up on my own, and a lot of them I just didn't really enjoy that much, even though I thought that they were pretty good overall. There were a lot of things that just didn't really run to my taste, so there were times that this was a little bit of a struggle. There was one book that I did not manage to finish, so I'm going to put that one in number 6, and that is Luna by McDonald. I just couldn't get into this book. I got about, I can't remember, it was maybe a third to a half of the way through, and I really tried, and then I sort of put it down for a little while, and I told myself I was going to come back to it, and then I just never managed to come back to it. So eventually I decided that it was okay, and I wasn't going to force myself to read it, and I decided to put it aside permanently. So this was a book that just definitely wasn't for me. Assuming the other books in the series have a similar tone and style, I think it's fair to say this just isn't a series that I would enjoy very much. I know I mentioned that it gets compared to Game of Thrones, but I feel like at least Game of Thrones has some characters that you like or that are good people, even though admittedly a lot of the characters who are good people tend to end up dead the fastest. But in Luna, I just didn't like any of the characters at all. I felt like the author did some really interesting things in creating this world and describing what effects living on the moon would have on people, how the society evolved, how they evolved physically, all of that stuff. There was a lot of world building in it, but I just pretty much hated every single character, and I'm not sure if I was supposed to like them or I was supposed to feel that way, but that was dark in a way that I just don't enjoy very much. So I'm going to put that in my number 6 spot, but I know that some people do enjoy reading that kind of book with morally great characters and fighting, you know, between different political factions and stuff like that, but for me it was just too much and I wasn't in the mood for it. In my number 5 spot, I have the Wormwood Trilogy, where Rosewater is the book that I read. Kind of like Luna, this just wasn't really something that was for me. I did think it was a very well-written book. I did finish it. I thought there were a lot of interesting ideas. It was definitely weird and different and complex, but I think the main thing that made me not like it very much, honestly, was just there were a lot of elements of body horror and weird violence in a way that just kind of grossed me out. I don't mind things that have graphic content, but I am a very squeamish person, and so it doesn't take that much for me to hit this edge of me just not wanting to read certain things because I just find it too gross. So again, I would probably not continue reading the Wormwood Trilogy, but I understand why it's a work that a lot of people think is great or important for the genre. In my number 4 spot, I put the Planetfall series. I think this is the first series where I felt like maybe I would read another book in this series. I did enjoy reading Planetfall. It did keep me turning the pages. It was sort of a dark psychological thriller, and I thought it was pretty interesting. I think I'm not that excited by the fact that, first of all, Planetfall didn't really get wrapped up in a very satisfying way, but then the other books in the series are not that related to it. So I don't feel super excited about it. I didn't love it, but I did enjoy reading it a little bit more, and I could see myself potentially reading some more books in this universe. In number 3, I'm putting The Expanse and Leviathan Wakes. Obviously, this is the best known series on this list. I'm sure a lot of you have read it or heard of it. It took me a little while to get into it. Maybe I was just still really burned out on science fiction after the past few months. I've read so much more science fiction than usual. And I think it also just took me a while to gear up into it. I had to keep reminding myself, like, okay, this is a 9-book series. It's okay if you're not totally engrossed from page 1 of book 1. Something like this takes a little time to build up to. I still need to film a review of this, which I will do sometime probably in the next week, so I'm not going to say a ton about it, but I did end up quite enjoying the book and thinking it was good, and I feel like I probably will continue reading this series. I'm not going to run out and continue it next month, but I feel intrigued enough by the first book, and also because it is a pretty big series, I feel like I will keep going with it, and I feel like it was well done. In number 2, I'm going to put the Encrypted series by Seanan and McGuire, with Discount Armageddon being the first book. I really enjoyed this book a lot. I'm expecting to really enjoy the rest of the series. This is a book that I would not have picked up on my own because I don't usually read urban fantasy, but it is exactly the kind of series that I would normally go for. It's humorous and long-running and witty and has crazy characters, and it's just a lot of fun. So this is something that's very much up my alley, and I could actually see this being a favorite series for me depending on how I end up feeling about books 2 through 9 or however many there are. So I definitely think this was the best find that I had off of this list of finalists. And so in number 1, I'm going to put the Winternight series by Katherine Arden. This feels a little bit unfair since it's the only series that I have actually read all of. That also means it's the only one out of these series that I was interested in enough to go and pick it up on my own. So that means there's a certain amount of self-selection there. Obviously, I have some idea about the kinds of series that I'm interested in, but I also don't want to leave it off this ranking because it is on the list. And I did recently start listening to the audiobook of it as part of a reread, just to give myself a little bit of a reminder what it was like when I was going to do this ranking video, and I'm probably going to at least finish listening to the first book. I still really like this series. I still feel like it was my favorite series on this list of finalists. The series itself is kind of slow and atmospheric, and the narration style is a little bit more on the fairy tale literary side, but it's something that I really enjoyed, and I think the right reader will really enjoy it as well, although it's probably not something that every fantasy and science fiction reader would like. I also really like the central characters of this series. I think that Vasya, the main character, is a really good example of a strong female character who is defying traditional feminine roles, and I really like how that is handled in this series in a sort of historical context. It's also clearly a very heavily researched series that really showcases a historical period, which is something else that I really enjoy. So for me, as much fun as I thought the Encrypted series was, I'm going to have to say that the Winternight series was my number 1. I have no idea which one of these series is going to end up winning the award, but I guess we'll find out in a few days. So let me know down in the comments what you think of my personal ranking and how you would rank these books if you've read any of them. And please like this video and subscribe if you want to see more videos from me.